It's been 2 months since that little incident. I've been going to therapy. I've tried not to watch the news. It just makes me feel depressed. If my neighbors knew that I was patient zero, they'd probably never speak to me again. Over half of them got my sickness after all. I was approached by a couple of government agents and hauled in for questioning. 12 hours later, and the weird thing is, they never flashed a badge, gave names, or even said what part of the government they were with. Suddenly, they said I was free to go. No one believed me when I told them about the city underneath Oregon, or the man with sharp teeth. Barely believed myself now. According to my psychologist, I probably just had a nervous breakdown, stress-induced hallucinations. The bite on my leg could have been caused by a rabid dog. A few nights after I got back to the States, someone at the same hotel I'd stayed at had gotten bit by a wild dog. But still, I can't get past the details. I remember them so clearly. The amphitheater-shaped cavern, lights crisscrossing the massive ceiling, the illumination casting a warm glow over everything, the people moving in small groups, excitedly talking, and the doctor peering down at me with her cold eyes. I pounded my head against the car's headrest. Why can't I stop thinking about this? I got out of the car and walked to my apartment. I turned the key in the lock and cursed as my hand slipped and pulled back a fingernail. Ah! My dog heard me as soon as I unlocked the front door. She started to bark and whine in excitement. I shushed her and scratched her behind the ear with my good hand, sucking at the bad nail. It's okay, just me. Woof woof! Yeah, I missed you too. Lacey wagged her dark tail and nestled my hand. I scratched her gently, afraid for the rest of my fingers. I used to live alone, but ever since my episode, the psychologist recommended a pet. Remember that job in finance I mentioned? Yeah, I quit a few weeks after I got back to the States. Gotta get my head right. That and the weird things have been happening with my body after the sickness. I only majored in economics because a girl I thought I'd marry said it'd be good for our future. Kinda stupid now that I think about it. It did pay well though. I didn't really have a life beforehand, so I just kinda saved it all. I'm just living off the dregs now, trying to get my head straight. Lazuli. God. I know I may have made it up, but still, that prick can get fucked, even if it's just in my head. I popped a frozen dinner into the microwave and listened to the hum as the plastic spun inside the small box. Usually, the spaghetti was pretty good for a frozen dinner, but today, it was just a smell. It did nothing for my appetite. Elhaven, what a crazy place. I heard a branch snap outside. I stiffened for a second, then forced myself to breathe. It's fine, Hampton. Probably just a neighbor. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing. That's odd. Beep! I heard the microwave signal me, so I answered its call. I wished it was steak. Medium rare would be perfect right about now. Boom! 3 things happened just as I pushed in the microwave release latch. The front door exploded inward. The back door exploded inward. People with guns ran into the room and one tackled me to the ground. I lay there dazed as a soldier sat on top of me. Elvar Command, we have contained the target. I repeat, target neutralized. Wait, that voice sounds familiar. Oh no, it's all real. The Elhaven commando roughly forced me onto my stomach and zip-tied my arms together. She roughly pulled me up, then began marching me out of the now ruined front door. I was blubbering at that point. Stop, no, I don't want to go. What about my dog? As I was pushed out of the front door, I could see neighbors at their windows, watching as I was kidnapped. Doubtless, they thought the government was conducting a raid, and I was some sort of drug dealer, or pervert. I began shouting. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm being kidnapped. But no one came out to help me. I was roughly pushed into a black SUV, 2 guards on either side, 2 in the back and 2 up front. The rest piled into a second sedan. Not gonna knock me out this time? I don't know where my bravery was coming from, but while I still had it, I'd use it. One of the guards punched me in the stomach. Hard. Okay. Bravery gone. I coughed and sputtered, then shut the hell up. Our ride was a long one. It felt longer as the anticipation of not knowing what was going to happen stretched from seconds, to minutes, to hours. We took an exit that read Gifford Pinchot National Forest. Oh God, they were going to execute me in the woods and throw me down a cave. I started to hyperventilate. Calm down, ordered the female trooper. She sat to my left. They all wore black face masks and tactical helmets, their faces hidden from view. My home was near Seattle, so I was familiar with the Gifford Pinchot area. It's a large, thickly wooded piece of land that has hiking trails such as the Pacific Crest and the Ape Caves. We took a series of roads that gradually transitioned from asphalt to gravel, then to a barely maintained trail. At this point, I was totally lost, even with my eyes unblinded. I doubt I could find this place again. We parked near an old shack with a no trespassing sign nailed to the door. I got roughly pulled out of the car. The team had guns ready, flashlights blazing through the surrounding darkness, and the leader knocked on the door. It swiftly opened and I got rushed inside. The middle of the floor in this cabin was gone. In its place, a massive hole had been dug, leading down at a sharp angle. It reminded me of an old mining tunnel, complete with wood timbers supporting the earth. I heard the cars start up and drive back the way they'd come. Move! I moved. We traveled down for a long time and there were a bunch of side passages and tunnels branching off, but we always stayed to the right or to the middle. I began to grow tired, then exhausted. My feet ached horribly. I would have slowed down or stopped altogether, except the soldiers behind me pushed me roughly forward. These soldiers never seemed to grow tired. It had to be at least 5 or 6 hours of walking, but I finally began to see lights in the distance. The wood beams holding up dirt had long since given way to stone. The tunnel floor was slightly sandy and fairly damp. I shivered in the cold. I hadn't exactly grabbed a coat on the way out. We came upon a metal gate set into the stone. The leader tapped on the gate 3 times and a slide opened for a second, then snapped shut. Identify yourselves. Subjugation, Elvar Bravo, returning from the hunt. The leader pressed an ID badge up to the scanner near the slide. A green click and a bolt on the other side of the door slid back. A door in the metal gate swung open and we all filed through, single file. 2 men, or creatures? I stopped and stared. One of them smiled at me, bearing his sharp, pointed cat-like teeth. I gasped and lurched away from him, only to be caught by one of my captors. The creature inside the gate covered our whole group with rifles. It had jet black eyes, long pointed ears, and sharp cat-like teeth. They looked strong and muscular, their skin a different shade of light blue or gray. We passed 2 more such checkpoints. Each time the drill was the same. Man, these guys looked ready for anything. I had a horrible thought. These didn't look like new installations. In fact, they looked really old. Just how long had these people been down here? The farther down the tunnel we got, the nicer things became. We gradually transitioned from sandy wetness to a more dry stone floor. Electric lanterns started appearing, spaced out every few hundred feet. We came to what looked like a sort of underground railway system. A small train, open-topped and rusted, sat docked at one end. The squad lead talked with an old-looking Elvar woman for a brief moment, then waved his finger in the air. I was shoved down into one of the seats. Kidnapped for the 2nd time in my life, all within the space of a year. This really sucks. I gotta admit though, sitting down felt really good. I didn't know how much farther I could have gone. We sat for a few hours as the train glided through the rails. It was some sort of electric variant that I'd never seen before. It was fairly silent except for a faint humming. The tunnel walls sped by and my eyes gradually closed. I woke with a jerk as the train slid to a smooth stop. We had arrived at a sort of wide open cave. Homes had been carved into the rock walls, and people went about their business. More of the dark-skinned, sharp-toothed people lived here. I saw 1 or 2 fawns, but mostly it was the Elvar. We got out of the car at the edge of the cave and walked the 20 minutes it took to reach the other side. I noticed a few small tunnels leading off the main one. I strained my eyes through the low light. I could just make out large shapes moving about in the corral. As we passed close by one, I could see that it was a large caribou-like animal, eating a lichen off the wet stone wall. One of them raised its head and glanced at me. I shivered. It had short horns poking out of its snout, and the teeth inside its mouth were jagged and pointy. Its red eyes glowed in the low light. "What are those?" I asked the guard next to me. She responded in a low voice, barely audible above our footsteps. "Algaki. They're bred for meat and as pack animals." We traveled for the rest of the day, sometimes by small trains and sometimes by foot. Occasionally, when I had to relieve myself, a guard would accompany me down a small side passage. It twisted and turned at sharp angles, locking the scent of fecal matter and piss behind the walls of stone. A deep hole had been drilled at the end of these specially designed offshoots. The guard accompanying me never stopped watching me. I did my best to ignore her as I sat facing away from her. Fortunately, with the scant amount of liquid and the food I was given, there wasn't too much to process. The guards around me seemed to relax as we slid into the small train station. The track stopped, but a large tunnel filled with people led out of the opposite side of the cave. We disembarked, and I stretched my stiff legs. Don't try anything funny, Hampton, or you'll get the butt of my rifle, you hear? Yeah. We joined the throng of people. The guards clustered around me and gently pushed people aside that got too close or in the way. After a space of about 100 meters, we entered a cave that was 10 times the size of anything else we'd previously seen. It was the same one I'd run through to escape my previous captivity. A large sign read, "Welcome to Elhaven, now entering Gate Square." The squad ushered me to the left as soon as we entered the large open space. I honestly didn't think I'd ever be back. Of course, I also believed that I'd imagined this whole thing. I gazed at the huge gates humming with power. Only a few of the gates were active, yet still the air hummed and pulsed with power. The leader led us to a tunnel that ended at the entrance to the Elvar operational headquarters. I was placed in a small room with a single table and chair inside of it. A bottle of water was placed next to me. I drank it in one chug. I was left alone for a few minutes, then an old-looking Elvar wearing a cloak clasped together with a gold chain strode into the room. He stopped in front of me, gazing into my eyes. "Welcome to Elhaven." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, but didn't say anything. "What is your association with Lazuli Elegant?" I looked at the old Elvar, then glanced at the guard standing by the door. "Eyes on me, boy. What is your association with Lazuli Elegant?" "Nothing. I met him once in a bar, then he attacked me in my hotel room. I hate that fuck. He really messed me up." "I don't believe you. Why did you help Lazuli in creating and spreading a Mundani plague?" "What do you mean? I didn't help Lazuli. At least not by choice. Lazuli bit me, then I was dragged down here. One of your doctors injected me with things and said it was to make me better." The man paced away inside. "I presume you are referring to Jeressa. She's a gifted virologist and apparently an associate of Lazuli. Lazuli and his lot were the ones experimenting on you, not the common Elvar." "What?" "The bite. Lazuli infected you with his bacteria, and Jeressa used some sort of serum to speed along the incubation period. We caught her the day you and Lazuli escaped. She admitted as much. I got really sick for a time, but I'm fine now." "Are you, though?" I looked into the Elvar's dark, hard eyes. I was the first to look away, unable to compete with his penetrating stare. The old cloaked Elvar put a vial of blood on the countertop. I looked at it wordlessly. He motioned to a guard who flipped off the lights. He shined a flashlight into the blood. I saw faint shimmering strands gliding through the dark liquid. "That's your blood, Hampton. We took it off of Jeressa when you escaped. It seemed that Lazuli transmitted bacteria stored in his gums to your body. You became very sick in a very short amount of time. You infected other people, but only with a secondary set of germs that was diluted out of your body. Inside your body, however, the bacteria has been morphing into tiny parasites. They've been changing you at a genetic level and feeding on your blood vessels in return." I sat there shivering, knowing there were tiny parasites inside every part of me. Imagining the small shimmering strands floating up and down my body, it filled my heart with terror. I almost threw up. I caught myself, rallied, then saw the vial on the table again and abruptly threw up over the table. "What's going to happen to me?" "We have a hunch based on your blood sample. However, nothing is for certain. The US government decided that rather than having an unknown entity change in the midst of a city, they allowed us to take you off their hands and study you." The enormity of my situation came crashing down on me in a final and devastating blow. I'm not going to be saved. The USA knows about you? Do you really think we could be directly underneath America and they wouldn't find out? We've been peaceful cousins for about 100 years. Certain technologies like the internet and cellular communication were developed by us. The old Elvar smirked and walked to the opposite side of the room. "No, not again. I don't want to do this. I have rights as an American citizen." "Yes, you may be an American citizen, Hampton. However, do you think the government really wants the source of their plague living in the midst of a major city? Especially when he's infected by a gene-changing parasite? Wouldn't it be easier to allow an underground society to have a goodwill offering? That doesn't make sense, though. The government would want to keep me away and study me, possibly turn me into a weapon. Not if they received something of greater value, such as $3 Lazuli Elegant. We've had a solid truce with the US ever since we first met. This year will be the first time we'll give them a live specimen to study." "What is $3? "They are basically mutated Elvar. Lazuli's body was born without the ability to produce red blood cells. However, if he drinks it, his body will use the new blood to make more. He's sterile and his bite transfers a very rare mutated bacteria to the bitten. Usually the bacteria only causes a Mundani to become very sick, and the Strongylis to suffer psychosis for a few days. It affects Strongylis and Mundani in a different way. The next few hours passed in much the same way for myself. People came in, asked questions, and walked out. I felt the simmering anger of impatience and knew this was all Azuli's fault. I ground my teeth and imagined smashing my fist into his face. The guard stayed through all of it. I think it was the female kill team member from earlier. She never said anything to me, but I could feel her eyes watching my every move. Finally, they took me out of the interrogation room and marched me 30 minutes away through a series of small caverns. They led me to a shallow cave with a bar set into the entrance. A real old-fashioned dungeon. It was cold and damp, but at least the bed in the corner had a thick woolen blanket. The female guard had marched me to the cell. The female guard had marched with me to the cell and now stood outside, holding a rifle at the ready. I slumped into the bed and held my head in my hands. What was I going to do? I lay down and thought about the people back home. I didn't have a lot of friends. I doubted they would even realize something was wrong for a few weeks. The few friends I'd managed to make over the years had soon stopped accepting invitations when I began ranting about Elhaven. I did this to myself. A nurse, or the Elhaven equivalent, walked into the cell pushing a cart full of different implements. The guard unlocked the cell with a key she kept in the pocket of her pants. He was a male Elvar, short, with a bald head. "Strip, please." "No, I think I'm good with my clothes on." The Elvar nurse beckoned to the guard, who stepped forward menacingly. I hurriedly began taking my clothes off. Better take them off myself than have someone force them off. A sort of screen sat on the cart. It was clear with English text at the top, saying my name. The Elvar produced a small gun-like tool. He pushed a button on it and a laser field emitted from the end. He ran it up and down my body twice, then pushed another button on the scanner and the screen on the cart flashed green. He told me to hold out my hand and I did so. He held the gun to my finger and a needle shot out, taking a sample of my blood. A series of numbers and letters began populating various fields on the glass screen. Height, 5 foot 11 inches. Weight, 160 pounds. Eye color, green. Hair color, dark brown. BMI, 25%. Blood glucose, 88. Age, please, he asked. 30. What are you measuring me for? Captain's orders. The Elvar male then pulled out a large syringe and filled it with some sort of clear, syrupy liquid. Arm, please. I hesitated, staring at the needle. The Elvar looked at the guard again, and I thrust my arm out in a quick motion. Faster than I thought possible, the man grabbed my arm and pulled me forward, with the same motion stabbing the large needle into my chest. I gasped and tried to kick away, but the Elvar man twisted his weight and slammed me onto the floor, knocking the wind out of me. I moaned and feebly tried to fight the Elvar away, but he was relentlessly strong. Every movement of my resistance caused the needle to painfully pivot around my chest. He finally pinned me to the ground with a knee and carefully began injecting the fluid into my chest. I felt it spreading. It was icy cold, and I hated it. "What are you doing?" I choked out the words, unable to resist Elvar's iron grasp. "White blood cell blocker. It will allow the parasites to finish their work faster." As I scrabbled at the Elvar, a couple of my fingernails broke free from the bed. I grunted in pain and stopped struggling, staring at my hands. The Elvar pulled the needle out and jumped back, releasing me as he did so. I tried to swing my fist, but I was slow, and he was already back at the cart putting things away. "Can't just treat me this way." "Word of advice, Mundani. You're gonna be here for a long time, and you most certainly will be treated like property. Don't resist, and show that you'll cooperate, and things will be much easier for you." I gritted my teeth, anger tinging my vision with red. A klaxon began wailing nearby. I looked around. "What's happening?" The Elvar listened for a moment, and by the look on his face, I knew it wasn't going to be good. "Boggle raid."